What's going on, beautiful J4 family and community? We're already struggle streaming, as the lead attorney likes to call it. Back on my microphone check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, beautiful people? Welcome to another edition of J4 Conversation. Actually, this is a special edition. It's been one that's been asked for, or some folks said, "Where's that biracial guy? Where's that other guy that you were on that video with?" Mr. Gene Boyd. And so, Gene, you've been requested. You've been people have been curious about your life lived, particularly the way you were sharing and disclosing and sharing your tribulations from getting booed off the stage as a young Dr. King and later on in life, relationships, and maybe we'll get into some of that. But as folks are coming in, welcome you guys. Be sure to hit that like button. We truly appreciate that. Wanted to kind of bring back in, not he is obviously a dear friend, but he is the founder of J4 Conversations about right before COVID, and COVID then maximized it. But Gene, who at the time had an 18-year-old son entering college, my son was 18, also entering college, and we said, hey, let's do something proactive and talking about competencies to help our young men come of age. And so we said, hey, let's do it, but let's do it collectively. And so for the longest time, J4 Conversation was in no way culturally related, but was always about two fathers and two sons chopping it up about life. And speaking of life, life got a hold of them. The freshmen are now juniors, student athletes, leaders in the community, got
Wow.
their own, got their own priorities and interests. And so they kind of weaned off. And then Gene became very, very busy in his professional and personal life. And as you all know, I'm empty nesting. So I had some time where perhaps the other folks didn't. So we've been in hiatus as a collective four. So now we're a collective two, and we'll get the other young men involved in some capacity. But welcome. I see folks coming in here. Welcome. You guys hit that like button as you come in. But today we're going to sort of revisit the most popular video for J4 Conversations, where Gene and I were just vibing and chopping about. The title was White Mothers and Their Biracial Black Sons. And I think it was that biracial black that made it go viral, at least in our world. And so we wanted to revisit that. What's going on, Mulatto Vanguard? Mulatto says, what's going on, gentlemen? Just as an FYI, Mulatto Vanguard is the one who asked about you. If you were coming back on, Mulatto is what shall I say, a mulatto advocate. He has his page which he devotes it to mulatto identity development and information sharing. And he is he's been a strong supporter of our page, and we've done some collaborations on a number of things. So welcome, Mulatto. Be sure to put in any questions you have for Gene or myself as we kind of get this thing going. Magic Mulatto has also been a supporting sister. Hello, J4, hand pink waving person, turquoise waving. So let me introduce y'all to my dear friend. Gene and I have known each other almost 30 years. We worked together. Back in the day, we partied together. But most of all, we are confidants. We talk to each other about life. We talk to each other about our profession, and we talk to each other about our children. He is among my closest friends, y'all. Please welcome in Mr. Gene Boyd. Gene, talk to him.
Thank you, my brother. Not only my friend, but my brother.
No doubt.
Yeah. Good to be back. Although was absent in this space, obviously present in the space of the world that we live in, and lots of things going on. We're living in a ever-evolving, changing world. Maybe for all those alive on the planet, the most accelerated and changing world that any of us has ever experienced.
Mm-hmm.
So along with that, we continue to evolve in our thought, continue to evolve in how we apply our personal life philosophies to the lives that we live. And looking forward to the conversation, my brother.
Me too. As custom, when we start out, we want to send a shout out to the legends, the biracial legends. So to Al Be Sure, we salute you, brother. Al Be Sure in the house. To El DeBarge, the musical soundtrack of my high school years, we salute you. And we cannot have a biracial related conversation without a heads up, a T-knob to the one and only Miss Lisa Bonet. Special mention to Sade. Sade certainly was a part of the musical soundtrack. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is a parenting channel for the most part, parenting Black and beautiful biracial kids, but it has also evolved into an intergenerational voice. Many of the folks who have been listening in are in their 20s and 30s, and they're going through a different time. You talked about change. When we started getting all the comments on that video, I was literally taken aback about the number of beautiful young people of mixed heritage, mulatto heritage, who were saying that they're not black for a host of different reasons. So just to anchor us and recenter us, Gene, tell us where you're from, where you were born, and how you identify culturally.
Absolutely. Just trying to get reacquainted with the technology
Yeah, it's
here.
been a while.
There we go. I was born in Inglewood, California. Uh, for those of us who may be a little bit older, Inglewood was home of the Great Western Forum, where my favorite basketball team, the Los Angeles Lakers,
Yeah.
called home at the time. This
Mm-hmm.
Staples Center, which is now, what is the Staples Center called now? What the home of the Lakers in Los Angeles and the Clippers,
And the Clippers. Yep. Yep.
for that matter. I can't think of the name of the arena. It's been
Staples.
no, it was Staples. It's been retitled.
Mulatto Vanguard. What's the name of the stadium? You live there.
New corporate sponsor
Okay.
out there with the Lakers. At any rate, born in Inglewood and grew up in my early years in Carson, California, which was a very mixed area, if you will. A lot of Polynesian individuals in the space. Certainly, a lot of Black individuals in the space. Some Latino, Latina, and at the age of about 9 years old, my father departed. My father is a Black man, and he married a white woman in the very late 60s. All can imagine what types of energy they received in their relationship, even on the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, at any rate, he departed when I was 9, and so we went from going to a private, very diverse school, which had every color under the rainbow, into the Compton Unified School District, bust over from Carson, California, over to Compton, into that school district, which was 99.99999% Black.
Right. Right.
And at the time period, I was just as fair skinned, still had blue eyes, but also was very blonde. And my hair was not only blonde, but very straight
Mm-hmm.
with a part.
Yeah, I called you Dennis the Menace in the previous
Yeah,
show.
I looked like it. Dennis the Menace, Casper the Friendly Ghost, all of the above, right?
Right. Right. Right.
And so, it was a very interesting time. Obviously, as you are on the continuum of life, and you are developing your identity, both your personal and social identity. It was a time where I quite frankly didn't fit in.
Mm-hmm.
I looked white, but felt Black from a cultural standpoint, from an identity standpoint, internally and intrinsically, and was not accepted at that point in time. And in fact, I would even say was looked at sometimes as the mark.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
diving right in.
Mm-hmm.
Looked at as the mark, meaning that when things would happen, civil unrest. This was post Watts riots era. In the mid to late 70s. Still a lot of things happening post civil rights movement,
Mm-hmm.
of course. And so when things would happen and the community would be talking about the angst and the oppression, of quote unquote white people, they
Right.
looked at me
Mm-hmm.
as one of
Yeah,
them.
you were the symbol of white. Mm-hmm.
Correct. So, we were dealing with that at a very formative time in my life development and life cycle, and so that created a lot of confusion, a lot of insecurity, and a lot of other things. Right around the time period where I was going into kind of the junior high. The latter part of junior high, we moved into another city that was 2 cities over called Paramount, California, which was very heavily Latino, some African American, some Polynesian, and
Mm-hmm.
so forth, even some more white folks. And so, that became an environment where, I felt a little more, I guess, comfortable and a little bit more welcomed by certain parties, but
What
still
grade? What grade
early,
was that? What grade was that?
eighth
Okay,
grade.
middle school. All right.
Yeah, but still very rooted in, the identification of Black,
Mm-hmm.
primarily with this understanding that my mother was white. So at that time, I hadn't really put together all the language regarding biracial, mixed, all those kind of things. Although other people had, language that they used,
Right.
I just was a black white looking kid because I was born to a white mother. You
Mm-hmm.
know, trying to go into the next phase of my life in a way that again had produced a lot of insecurity from my life history.
But
Uh,
Gene, let's pause there, and then that's about the eighth grade. Let me jump in to catch up with you. For those of you listening in, thank you guys. Continue to converse among yourself, but also, if you have any questions for essentially two biracial men who, in the early stages of their life, like Gene is talking about, were Black identifying. I am going to ask Gene, do you think differently about culture now? But similarly, I was born in '68. Gene was born in
71,
70, 71.
71.
About 1% of people identified as two or more races. And it was a different kind of reality. My parents were born in the 40s, and they oriented me to the world, from that lens. I grew up in military environments, so we had niche communities of Black GIs married to Korean, German, French mothers. My mother was from France. They met in France and came back to the United States and got married, and had to pick a state where it was legal for interracial marriages. So it had just, when I like to jokingly say, I was conceived illegally, but I was born after the Loving Act of 1967, and so they had to pick a state where it was permissible for them to live, at least legally. Now, societal in terms of how they were treated, don't quite know that. But yeah, I kind of grew up in a protected environment of the military base. Of families and children's behavior can be regulated because of their job can be impacted by family behavior in a military environment. But it wasn't until middle school, similar to you, that I went to Jim Bridger in Las Vegas, Nevada. And at that time, it was base kids predominantly going to a school in a Black and Latino neighborhood. And so I too had this multicultural experience, but very much felt in the proverbial gray, always kind of looking in from the outside, uncertain about a cultural identity, and was just trying to figure out life. And at simultaneously, my parents got divorced when I was probably about to had just kind of been in high school a few years, and for some reason, some odd reason, the absence of my maternal white mother in the house then psychologically took me out of this duality, and I began to live differently. And I think it was in large part because my father, may your father rest in peace, Gene, he too then began to enter into a Black renaissance because he had understood his own personal struggles in an interracial marriage. Rest in peace to my mother, who transitioned about 10 to 12 years ago. But it was the divorce was culturally liberating for me, and I made some decisions at that time in my life about how I was going to proceed, and it was going to proceed and rooted in a Blackness.
Yeah,
So,
AJ, if I can interrupt right there, I think this is a key point or a key moment in terms of these two paths that had similarity, at least in this, you know, racial ethnic component,
mhm,
right? Where, Black father, white mother, all of your mother, European, literally,
right,
mine, American, from the Arkansas area,
by way of Germany,
by way of Germany, ancestry wise.
right,
And so, there's those similarities, but then in this, and the reason I pause and want for people to kind of consider this is that they went this way because you went into a primary living condition with your Black father.
right,
I went into a primary living condition with my white mother,
exactly,
right? And so that
exactly,
has all kind of different connotations. Now, you could, in some situations, splinter that even further, where two individuals might go into a primary living situation with their white mother, And if it's in, a suburban area, somebody on the chat said that they were from the Orange County area,
Mm-hmm.
right? If it was in, a particular type of neighborhood, cultural environment, etc., with a white mother, with predominantly white people, around them, that acculturation might take on a whole different
Mm-hmm.
spin than mine did, because
Mm-hmm.
I was living with a white mother, but still in a very predominantly minority environment. And my white mother worked at a 100% black church in South
Mm-hmm.
Central Los Angeles for 52 years. And so in the moments I wasn't at school or at home, we were at this church, in this church community that was all black. It was kind of back to what I was growing up in Compton when I was in elementary and junior high school. So the reason I wanted to take a pause for a moment and talk about these different variations and variables,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's become very easy to paint a broad stroke for even quote unquote biracial folks, black and white,
Mm-hmm.
but the variance in that biracialness,
Right.
mixed raceness, whatever language people are wanting to use, is so divergent and different, right? Just
Right.
like we would even say in the black experience, generally speaking,
Mm-hmm.
in the black experience, if someone is from two black parents,
Mm-hmm.
but they grew up in an environment that, from a cultural standpoint, is more European Americanized, then their dialect, their
Mm-hmm.
tone,
Mm-hmm.
their normative engagement
Right.
philosophy, and all these kind of things are going to look very different than someone who is a keep it real
Mm-hmm.
you know individual who's all black. So you know in my evolution of thought over time, which I'll talk about a little bit later, a lot of these variables I've had to analyze over time, and it's hard to paint broad strokes
Yeah.
of folks from any racial or ethnic diaspora.
Yeah. Yeah.
Diaspora.
Man, to your point, man, identity is changing so fast, and there's a number of societal factors, to include legislation that accelerated the proximity that historically segregated groups didn't have to each other. And like I always say, you put some people together and they get curious about each other, all of a sudden they start dating and making babies, right? And so, it was 1% in our era. Today it's 10%, or 33.8 million. And then of the 33.8% that are two or more races, 3.1% are black, white. And there's not a monoracial in the biracial. There's not a monolith in the biracial, right?
That's right.
So to your
Well, I
point.
mean, the house show, my reality as a mixed race person growing up in the 70s, 80s was a biracial, well mixed.
Right, that's what I want to talk about, because I think it
Right.
speaks to your point, right? So Al, who appears to be in our age set, he actually grew up biracial. To me, Gene, I didn't even know that existed. I didn't have the vocabulary. I certainly didn't hear any sort of biracial role model voices. If anything, I had encouragement from my predominant love source, which was my dad and his family, that embraced me, showed me love, showed me encouragement, but never talked sort of about a biracialness. It was
In the
almost
sixth
like,
in the sixth grade, AJ, what were you called? Like your peers in the sixth grade, fifth grade, what did they say to you? How did they address you? Where did you fit into the nomenclature of what you were seen as?
right. That's a great question. I don't know. I was on a military base, so I had white friends, I had black friends. Our identity was primarily through sports. Um, the dynamics of an in group dynamic. I don't know if I can articulate that.
I'll articulate
Yeah,
mine. In the fourth grade at Gardena Valley Christian School, which was like I said, every ethnicity, race at the school, I was Gene.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, no, but listen to this. In the fifth grade, when I, was pulled out of there and had to go to uh, Caldwell Elementary School in Compton, California, I was
Mm-hmm.
that white boy getting off the bus from Stevenson Village.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? I
Mm-hmm.
went from Gene
Right.
with
Gene,
my
just
own
Gene.
internal analysis of my ethnicity and all that kind of thing. I didn't have language for it either.
Right.
But I had, a brown black dad and a white mom, so I knew that there was some kind of mix. But I
Mm-hmm.
was gene in that space. And then when I went into Compton Unified School District, I was a white boy getting off of a bus from a certain neighborhood that was all black. Right?
Yeah, yeah. Let's roll there, right? So, yeah, I was just a name, to the Al show. My initial name was Al. My mom used to call me Al Capone, right? Then I didn't, and then I was Alonzo just kept getting messed up, so I took on AJ. But yeah, we're just kind of in your individual name, right? But I would say I didn't become strongly black identifying until the start of college, and it was a psychological decision I had made probably in my late junior and certainly early senior year. But let's spin off of what Al's talking about. My reality is a mixed race person growing up in the 70s and 80s, and I don't know where Al's from, but he was able to articulate and stand strong in a biracial identity, well, mixed as it was called back then. Did you even fathom being a part of a biracial mulatto community? Did that even enter into your mind? Was it even possible?
In that time period,
Yeah.
no, because the dichotomy of black and white and black versus white in this country didn't accept that. I don't think then, and it's not until much more recently with the proliferation, right, with the
Hmm.
explosion
Right. The numbers. Yeah.
of the interconnection between these different ethnic and racial backgrounds. And I'm kind of using race and ethnicity a little bit intertwined. I know there's distinct differences.
Hmm.
So if we want to get into that, we can. You probably better at that definition. But no, I mean, in fact, I fought for a lot of my younger life just trying to prove my blackness. I
Hmm.
wasn't interested in biracialness. I wasn't interested in whiteness.
Hmm.
I just wanted to prove I belonged as a black man.
Right, right. And those that's a definitely a generational thing. Today's generation of folks who are advocating for a more dominant third identity, as Mulatto Vanguard likes to talk about it, is in reaction to some of the pressure testing that we went through, but we didn't have. They call that gatekeeping, right? And I've talked about if a person is perpetually gatekeeped, at some point they'll just become frustrated and they'll say, "Okay, I believe you. You don't want me here. Your challenges, your rhetoric, your teasing, your bullying, whatever the case may be. So I'm going to find something else." That appears to be an option for today's generation, to where it was not back in our day, and so we had to have an extra fortitude, especially if we wanted cultural membership, because the alternative is cultural isolation or individual isolation. So what kept you, fighting? Literally, you fought on the football field. You had to navigate neighborhoods. This was Crip blood times. What you wore, where you went, who you were with. You were ultra caution of it. What made you keep digging in?
It was a much more dichotomous society. I
Hmm.
don't know if I just made up a word or not. Dichotomy, but
That's what we do
dichotomous.
over here on J4
That's
Conversations.
right.
Commercial,
That's
commercial.
right.
Y'all hit that
It,
like button. Gene is chopping and vibing in dichotomousness.
it was a dichotomous. It was a much more of a dichotomy. I mean, if we walk it back, right? You born late '60s and me early '70s. If you start walking it back just a few decades, it was much more taboo even for that kind of relationship. You talked about being born in an illegal space and time,
Hmm.
right? I mean, obviously, when we throw things out like Emmett Till
Right.
and what he was brutally murdered for,
Right.
that was in the 1900s. Close to mid 1900s. That wasn't you know at the beginning of
Yeah.
the slave trade, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Post slavery and all
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
this black white thing that's always been a part of this country's history, and only in the past, I would say 2 decades, has that been a more broadly, American societal acceptance.
Hmm.
I mean, it didn't matter if you were biracial or multiracial, or whatever. You were one or the other,
Absolutely.
based off of more of the paper bag, you know, test, for example. You were more one or the other, and so because I was born to a black dad in the all black community, pushed into an all black school, growing up in a church that was all black. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
my mindset and my cultural tone and tenor was, that's me. I'm
Yep.
black,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I gotta prove and belong to that.
Right. Yeah, I think it's wonderful that today's generation actually has options or can still find a sense of community beyond monoracial black, what I call the maternal cultural home for historical cultural home from a lot of people. That's a beautiful thing. But those of y'all listening in, we just didn't have that, right?
Right.
Other than my mother's divorce and when I was about 15 or 16, I never saw my mother's parents after I was 10 years old. So I had no white balance. I had no European balance or community. And so I began to live, almost exclusively in a black home space, and then psychologically in a try to figure it out space. And then when I went to college, even though it was a predominantly white institution, I discovered and ran towards a black community because I knew my development could not live in a proverbial gray or in the margins of cultural life, that I had to get in there. And I must admit that I was fully embraced. So let me ask you, Gene, and then we'll go to the see what's in the chat a little
Before
bit.
that question, AJ, let me contrast, which I think this is an interesting dynamic, compare and contrast of these two men right here,
Mm-hmm.
scenario situation. You moved into a black space in your mind and in your experience, right? Family wise and everything else. I'm in a all black space at home, at school, and at church with a white mom
Mm-hmm.
who on occasion would go to Arkansas to an all white family reunion,
Right.
right?
Right. Right. Right.
So you think about the dichotomy, what family members would say to my mother and to us, and the
Mm-hmm.
pity that they would have and look at us with, this is
Mm.
my mom's family, right?
Right. Right.
You felt that. So again, that's a reminder in that moment. Well, you don't belong over here.
Right.
So when you go back home into the environment that is completely black, again, you find a way. I mean, you asked me earlier. I became more and more energized and inspired, to actually become a radical at a certain point,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Despite the fact that I'm coming home to my white mama, and there were occasions where I would find embarrassment, even shame,
Mm-hmm.
in the reality that my mom was white.
Mm-hmm.
Think
Break
about
that
that.
down. Break that
Think
down.
about that.
So we vibed on that previously about that is identity politics, where you're a child or you're a middle schooler or even a high schooler, and
Right.
you're trying to navigate space, you're trying to navigate cultural membership. And this is probably the biggest gatekeeping dynamic, where you as a child or as a young teenager have to set in a personal choice to mitigate white mama's presence while you're trying to manage peer group. And because peer membership and peer affirmation and belonging is critically important for this younger age set, and biracial kids are put in this angst, they're put into this cognitive dissonance moment where they literally have to feel some kind of way about their mother's presence, and that evokes uncertainty, i.e. embarrassment. But it was often the luggage or the burden, for lack of a better term, of our generation of biracial kids that often, and I would say cowardly, silence our white mother's voice so that we don't have to navigate biraciality in predominantly black spaces. So those were some of the things that I sort of struggled with. But I will say, and then we'll kind of check out the chat and see if you have anything on this. I absolutely felt an embrace by blackness. I always felt there was a pathway into black cultural membership that I never felt was available to me in white circles. In fact, I had equal outgrouping or gatekeeping dynamics in white circles, to the point to where you got gatekeeping coming from both, but you're still seeking membership in blackness. You got gatekeeping or pushback in the black community you live in, but then you feel some kind of way at the white family reunion. But which one has more sting to it, right? Me coming of age, you talked about the history, the time that we were in, sort of white challenge that pissed me off way more than black challenge. So interesting there. Anything you want to say on that before we go to the chat?
Well, I mean, I would say that I equally felt repelled by both.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, right? and without language, understanding, or probably even the ability to process the why of it, which led to some dark moments, some lonely moments,
Mm-hmm.
some moments of overcompensation.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
you know,
Light skin overcompensation. Yeah, that's a real thing, y'all.
yeah,
That's a real thing.
all of that, all of that, and unlike I do think, and AJ, you and I have talked about this. I do think that my experience, and it's not it's not a singular experience, because there are
Right.
other individuals who have this multiplicity or duality of race that experiences, but a lot of biracial individuals, when you see them, you're like, you're mixed, right?
Mm-hmm.
At a minimum, you're light skinned,
Right.
right? But you're mixed, which I think that's kind of the full circle. Today, there is a place and a space for embracing, biracialness, mixedness, whatever the case is, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, where in my case, I literally looked white,
Yeah.
so I didn't even get the introduction, to come on and be a part of this black culture, because I know you're part black. Nah, it's like this white boy got to fade.
Wow.
Nah,
So,
this white boy got to fade.
so they thought you were fronting. You were perpetrating.
100%.
You was wigging. What they call a wigger? You a wigger?
Sure. Yeah, and to this day, I get asked several times a week where my accent is from.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and a lot of black people will say that, I knew you was black as soon as I heard you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where a
Mm-hmm.
lot of white people or others would say, where's your accent from? You sound like you're from the South.
The South. Tell them what South.
Yeah, South Central LA.
South Central LA. All right, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. That goes into hair politics, right?
Oh, for sure.
Obviously neither one of us is the darkest brother in the world, but there was an automatic, at least, understanding that I had some blackness in me, because I just had, I had the fro, I had the Jerry curl. I tried to do braids one day, but my dad like, get that shit out your head, boy. All right, let's go to the chat. Let me know if there's anything here that you see that you want to respond to. But now I'd like the chat. If you all have some questions for Gene, you all have heard me run my mouth quite often, and thank you guys so much for coming on in and supporting the channel. Gene is obviously forever part of the show, but he will not be on as much as me. So if you have some questions about another person of a biracial background who was black identifying for obvious reasons, the closing question will be, how does he see himself now? But let us offer that intergenerational perspective. So the Al Show, who's been busy up in here, thank you so much, Al. I've heard from black, white, biracial people who grew up in the 70s and 80s and prior that they didn't have a choice but to be black or identify as such, perhaps because of family or community. Absolutely. My dad was from Gary, Indiana, by way of New Orleans, and that's an all black city. It was a very prominent black city back at the day. And when I would go visit grandparents and aunties and uncles, man, they knew I was that half French, half black kid, but it was love, man. Today's biracials realize that we have a choice. I call it on my channel the third option. If y'all are new to the channel and really want to, check on someone that's uncompromisingly asserting multiracialness, biracialness, mulatto-ness, and there's some tension that's associated with that. Check out Mulatto Vanguard's page. Mulatto Vanguard, very interesting story, Gene. I'm intrigued. All right, I find that biracial people have varied experiences. There's no one biracial experience. True that. This panel affirms the conversation I had with a number of black, white biracials, namely diversity, right? Which is another challenge, y'all, in terms of cultural formation. Because it's one thing to have the same heritage configuration, a black parent and a white parent, but what we don't have is, well, maybe there's historical experiences that can bond you. That's what bonds blackness. But is the diversity so diverse that it just complicates the capacity for commonality? I don't know. Excellent point in articulation, AJ. The younger generation is over the constant gatekeeping. Imagine, if you will, if I could step into Gene's mind for a moment. If you lived in an all-black city, of which I didn't, and you're constantly being challenged, but there's no alternative, right? At least you all can step away. at least you all can psychologically go to this new world. You know, the internet, Earth birthed the new Earth, or the world birthed the new world. But imagine if you had to wake up every day walking out into an uncertainty based upon your skin. Mm, mm. And then to still have ultimately a love for it. Oh, that's beautiful. That's complex. That's a show unto
Yeah,
itself.
yeah.
I grew up in a multi-ethnic, multicultural neighborhood community. It wasn't in a white nor black neighborhood, so I never had anyone try to put me in a box other than being mixed. Right. So Al is articulating the high relevance of geography and environment and space and
Yep,
time. Huh.
yep, yeah.
Gene, anything?
No, I agree. I
Mm-hmm.
agree. I mean, I think one of the places that I have gravitated towards in my more recent life timeline, as a 51-year-old man who has a son with a black woman, with a, we may call her ebony black woman. Um,
Beautiful black skin.
yep, yep. Um, who is, he would probably be seen by some people as biracial, but
Mm-hmm.
he's not, right? He's
Right.
he's what do we call him?
Multi-generational mix, I think it is.
There you go, right? So um, the labeling, the labeling, and the intense need for the labeling, while I still need it. When I say need, it is a need, but it's become more problematic for me over
Mm.
time, right?
What
And
has Gene named that? Name that. What's
the
the
labeling, the labeling.
Okay.
What,
Okay.
what's
Right.
what's the label going to be, right?
Right.
Um, another conversation for another one of these sessions is the word mulatto.
Well, let me one second before you jump in there. This quick history. The community is debating a term right now, and what historically had a greater opposition towards mulatto, in my mind, seems to be trending because of its succinctness. Biracial, you don't know what configuration is. Mulatto is certainly
Right.
articulates right to black and white. There's a lot of folks in this space. I'm sure they're going to comment. They're down for mulatto, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And that's why I said that's another conversation for another time, because I have historical and current differing views on the labeling, but that's what it's connected to, is the labeling, right?
Hmm.
The incessant need, especially folks in this country, because of this dichotomous experience, and because of this uh, bipolar, right? This bipolar reality
Right.
that we've all been asked and forced to endure in this country, on this soil, in this land, in this space, with the context of history and religion and all the layers, between African and European individuals,
Hmm.
some who chose to come here, others who were drug here.
Hmm.
You know, that labeling, we have an obsession with, where a lot of other countries don't, and a lot of other people don't, right?
Right. Right.
So that's just a thing that I have had a lot of different evolutionary phases of contending with, making sense of for myself,
Hmm.
and so forth, and so I think that'll be an important thing to discuss in future conversations.
No doubt, no doubt. I think to be young is to self-reflect, to self-doubt, to have high curiosity about life, right? The grander questions. But then you throw in a particular birth or existence that is in the two, in the duality, and then you add thinking to that. I think inevitably you can't help but be very introspective as a person that's lived both in and outside two worlds. All right, let's get a little controversial here. A quick second. Alona Sand, thank you so much. I don't think you've ever been to the channel. You are welcome. You are welcome. No such thing as biracial and black. I would have to disagree with that, beautiful Alana, because that is what we are articulating right now. But it might be generational. We're saying as a 1968 cat born into a world coming of age in the 80s, that was in my most prominently, I'll call that the red and blue era. It was a Crips and Blood era. And to assert another identity when you were just trying to navigate high school gang politics to sort of pronounce I'm not black, I'm not white, I'm biracial would have isolated your butt and made you a vulnerable target to whatever young people antics were going on. Then you bounced into the 90s, which became high cultural consciousness in the music, in the reading, in the literature, in the arts, in the film. And that was a reclaiming of a sense of black and proud to sort of resurrect literally in the X symbol of the Malcolm X hat to stand up as a biracial kid, asserting identity, and that time would have again marginalized you at a time, quite frankly, where biracialness or mulatto-ness was bringing us quite a bit of privilege. Again, salute to Al B. Sure and salute to DeBarge. And so young people navigate their space among with their consideration of their peers. So yes, we were biracially born. We acknowledge two different heritage sources, but culturally, there was no biracial option. Culturally, there was no mulatto option. And so in that space, we declared black or black identifying. Now, that may have evolved over time for those born in my era, but it has certainly changed from folks who were born in later kind of
AJ,
decades.
and I'll venture off a little bit quickly, but Alana San, no such thing as biracial and black. There are completely other types of line of thought um, from a scientific, physiological standpoint. You know, what is race? We're all of one race, right? We're all descendants of Lucy in Africa, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, race as a construct, as a social construct. I get the sense she's coming from that
Oh yeah, yeah.
that
She might
thing.
be. You might
There's
you
no
might be.
such thing, right? There's no such thing as biracial. I mean, look, I don't know how many of y'all on here have done 23 and me or any of those types of things, right?
Right.
But you know, when I did it, I was like, please just let it be at least 30%.
Dog, I haven't done it yet. I
Hey!
haven't done it yet.
I wanted at least 30%, really 33%, right?
Yeah, it's
And
like the lotto.
that joker was 29.7. It was
Hey,
29.7. But I'm saying, if it so am I biracial if I'm not 50-50, right? I mean, you know, you can get into all of that,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know, scientific, you know, physiological, biological construct. I think that's where that comment comes from. I don't think she's trying to, you know, minimize or say that's not. I think this person is speaking literally, you know, scientifically, biologically.
Well,
Some people's perspective.
Alana, Gene's looking out for you. I went with the cultural construct kind of way. All right, beautiful. I'll ask another interesting question. Interesting, J4, that you note the absence of your mother took away the white balance, yes, as a biracial person. It explains why you likely were psychologically predisposed to solely be monoracial black. Absolutely. Absolutely. I would argue that it was the absence of the white, you have to, if your white mama's there, you got to be concerned and care and be mindful of white mama's feelings and her relationship. But in absence of that, I had a black Renaissance immersion largely on the footsteps of my father. Absolutely. And then that's predispositioned me, coupled with how I navigated social circles in my age set that reaffirmed a certain path or palatability in blackness. Now, while Gene had a loving maternal source who was white in his home, the matriarch of the family, the neighborhood, the schools, the community, the sport arena was Gene excelled at the highest level. That was his sort of gladiator space, which he had to sort of assert himself. So you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But the inverse is true. The inverse is true. If you don't grow up in culturally rooted, healthy spaces, then there's no modeling there for you. So how do you think about blackness, even though blackness is a part of you heritage-wise? How do you think about whiteness if you're not raised in embracing black communities? I too would say that predisposes you to whatever identity you have. Anything on that, Gene?
Yeah. Quickly, number one, I was the inverse with a white caring mother, as you stated, but still gravitated over towards monoracial blackness uh, uh, and it was because of those factors, the
Mm-hmm.
community, right,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
space that you lived in, and the music, and the language,
And the absence of an alternative.
for sure, for sure, there's that part, of course.
Beautiful. Interesting point. My outlook has been to not privilege other Caucasian or African. Frankly, I often say a plague on both houses. In today's pro-black circles, if you're not from the hood, they will outgroup you. Today's biracial mixed people have no choice but to create our own. Right. That is Mulatto's stance. He's sticking by it. But I will say, as Gene talked about, the evolving nature and complexity of cultures itself, there's certainly a way of being that's largely affected by poverty, dense geographical clusterings, elements of residual racism and those kind of things. But there's also an emerging group of black families who are the beneficiaries of the adage, I want my children to live a life better than the one I had. I'm a direct benefit of that, right? My pops goes out of Gary, Indiana, lives a life joined with my mother, and they live, I have more education than my father. I have a different kind of economic circumstances at my age than my father did. So he did his daddy duty, and he produced a child that has a different kind of world than he did. That's sort of the ultimate goal of a child. And there's many clusters of black folks. I'm living in that as an example. Gene is an example of that, who have achieved and excelled certain historical circumstances. Not excel, but who have taken the lessons of grandma, grandpa, mama, and daddy, and they live a certain kind of life with a anchoredness still in a blackness. So that can still exist, not to negate the third identity, but you still can exist black and or biracial in a very healthy, vibrant community that is black, that loves you, dotes on you, supports you, and lifts you up on a day-to-day basis. I experience it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, and even predating, the current era that we're in. I mean, obviously, Malcolm X was considered light skinned, right?
El Haj Malik El Shabazz had
Right.
a multi-racial, multi-generational grandmother or mother, right?
Right. Correct. And was fully and firmly embraced. So
Beautiful. So Centerpoint is another brother in our age said he wrote a book called Browning, The Browning of Europe. He's been on the show before. He has biracial children, I think. There definitely needs to exist such conversation because so much of the biracial or mixed experience is misunderstood and not told, right? And told generationally, right? The one thing that I've been uniquely humbled by is that even though the person that has no time and they come in and they get a sound bite, they're adamant there's biracials can't be black. And I saw a lot of that in our previous video. But folks who have kind of followed the channel a bit, they understand that was unique to our generation, right? So there's a certain generational nuance understanding that our reality is what it was, while at the same time they're standing firm in declaring sort of their own identity. I can respect that in part because I've been shown respect. Boom. Multi-generational mulatto. Okay. Terms like multi-generation mix are too ambiguous and mean nothing outside the internet. All right, this is a term I'm hearing. Have you ever heard of this term? A grift? Grift, Grift.
educate me.
Man, I only heard about it. I did a piece of Dubai Racial's old Dr. King, basically teeing up civil rights legislation and people coming in proximity. And person hit me up, said Dr. King was a grift, which basically is a person who is of a community but not quite there. Well, I think that's the case. Someone in the box, y'all give me a better definition of grift. I'm 55 years old. I haven't heard of these terms.
Rifts to obtain money or property illicitly
Okay, well,
as
we're
an
not that.
accomplice game. I mean, it sounds like someone who is, perpetrating to be a stalwart in the black community, but really is only doing it for profit.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
I asked them, was it derogatory? They said no, but that
Pro.
sounds, yeah.
I mean, to me, it sounds like pro-black for the people, but for their own profit and elevation.
Huh.
That's what the definition looks like to me.
Hey, well, we're both learning. Dichotomy is a good word to use as regards to black, white, biracials in the U.S. Uh, MGM is a loose term that will allow everyone in the mulatto group, not on my watch. Okay, that's mulatto. All right.
What is MGM? That's the education I need.
What?
MGM,
Multi generationally mixed.
got it.
Yeah, you were me 4 months ago. What the hell, Griff? MGM. Now Thunder is Thunder. I think was born in the 50s. I don't want to misdate you. He can trace his history back 200 years. He says, interesting to hear you guys' experience of having black white parents versus being multi generationally mixed, but having the look of Gene and how we navigated similar situations. All right, so you gotta look out here in Thunder.
Yeah,
All right.
yep, yep.
So Gene, have you ever? I would agree biracial doesn't make sense, but even admit number of mixed race, you felt it could be mixed years ago. Okay. Let me see what else might stand out.
How about what, AJ?
I grew up with white dad, a black mom. We're married until I was 10. They got divorced, and I live with my mom. Okay, so you had a similar experience in the reverse. Have you ever been called a wannabe, Gene?
Uh, I had an experience when I left the community and had the good fortune to go to Arizona State University. And as most people would, during breaks, holiday season, Christmas time, all the different times, summer,
Mm-hmm.
I would go back home, and of course, be with my mom and my friends that I grew up with, and my high school friends, and all that kind of stuff. And one of my best friends had a barbershop.
Okay.
Barbershop was in Long Beach, California. You know, Snoop Dogg and all the rest.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that people would associate Long Beach with in the black neighborhood, and that's the place where I would go and visit with my boy. Dan was his name, is
Right.
his name, and ironically also biracial. So I would go to the barbershop, AJ's barbershop,
Oh
off
yeah.
of Atlantic in Long Beach, Atlantic and South, and you know over a number of years, you go back there, and always in the back, people will be shooting dice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, my mindset was changing and growing. My level of, I wouldn't say necessarily intelligence, but emotional intelligence was growing.
Right.
So, each year or two, when I would come back into the shop, it'd be different kind of conversations going on, and I would bring different things to the table as it related to even our black community and so forth. And one time I went back there, man, they were shooting dice and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the brothers who I knew for a long time looked up and he's like, "Nigga, you done got bougie."
you got educated, huh?
Yeah,
You got
yeah. Nigga, you done got bougie.
wow.
Right. So I
Mm-hmm.
mean, same thing, right? You'll sell out, you a cop out, you're not down anymore. You done went away to college and got figured out and you
Uh-huh.
know, all these kind of things. So yeah. I mean that's an example, kind of a funny one and a very dramatic one.
Right, right.
But,
Go, you lead the
absolutely.
community, you come back, you just change, right? Those are all a part of the nuances there. Shout out to Alana San. She's holding true to what she said. All light skinned people are mixed. How you think light skin came about through racial mixing? No doubt. Um, so yes, phenotype, skin color, that obviously is a function of racial mixing, but culturally, I am the biracial and black identifying. Gene, I'm going to ask you, and then I want to go to the chat to see if you all have any specific questions for Gene primarily, and then myself, if you so choose. I want to see if there's any questions. We're at the 54-minute mark. If you're in here, please share a like. Would love to have that like on the page. But Gene, I want to say, you alluded in the white mothers and their biracial black sons about a shifting in identity dynamics. Would you still consider yourself black, or do you more psychologically claim a biracialness, or are you in a stage of life where that's really not in your thinking process? It's not even in your mental framework.
What day and time of the week are we in?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
But
yeah.
but 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 moreover, And again, the phenotype, the 23andMe exercise, which I laughed about earlier, was, a real moment where I look at, you know, my genealogy,
Mm-hmm.
and the 29%, of African versus, all these other things, and it's German, and it's some type of English, and it's some different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'm a mixed person.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I'm not biracial at all. I'm a mixed person.
Oh, you gonna claim them all, huh? Okay.
Well, I'm just saying. I mean, what is race, right? I mean, I could go into a whole dissertation on the thoughts that I've had, but I'm an individual who is a mixed person, and uh, who culturally identifies as Black,
Okay.
and who is more concerned now than I ever have been with the human experience.
Hmm. Transcending, not acknowledging, but transcending.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think that I communicated some things about relationship orientation, not
Mm-hmm.
only sexual orientation, but relationship orientation, and dating preferences and marital preferences that had some interesting energy around it. When I
Right.
talk about it, and I won't go into all of that. But for the and this does kind of summarize my viewpoint today. For all of my adult life, all of it, from the time I started being interested in partnering with somebody,
Mm-hmm.
all of my adult life, I felt like it was an absolute must that I had a Black woman as my partner.
Yes, sir.
Right, that was a must, and I've learned that partnership is about the soul. It's about kindred spirit. It's about shared values. It's
Mm-hmm.
about sharing a life that can impact your family and others.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no color associated with that for me any longer.
Boom. So that
So
that is your that is kind of your evolution, right?
that's a part of my evolution. And I'm married to a white woman currently.
Mm-hmm.
To not currently, forevermore.
Right. Right. Well, congratulations on the nuptials. It's been about 6 months. Gene, how long?
Yeah, about that long.
Congratulations.
And the only reason that I even quantified the race is that it was such a dramatic shift in me where I would not have even been open to. I honestly never dated a white person previous to that. So
Right.
I mean that's the significance. I was holding on to something that I thought validated and made me whole, or would help make me whole. And it's about all those other things that I named that have nothing to do with ethnicity, race, or even really culture, other than we have cultural similar beliefs.
Right. Which can everything you describe can also be found in any community. But there was in our generation an association with your social circles, your dating habits, your romantic interests as a statement of Black membership, right? And there's some legitimacy there in critiquing that, but we grew up in a racial political time, right? We were literally born in the beginning of an integrationist experiment. We were the first to sort of in mass sums be in literally mixed kind of environments, and we were trying to figure out a sense of self loyalty. And a predominant question for biracial kids is, who am I and what am I a part of? And you take cues, as all young people do, about you take certain messages from the cultural monolith. Sometimes those are very healthy for yourself, and sometimes they can be sort of problematic. But
Yeah,
just yep.
AJ, to extend on that, I mean, and looking at the comment from the chat that just was posted here, not coming from a monoracial community allowed me to be a straightforward biracial. a straightforward biracial, right? No one called me bougie nor cared that I would read a lot of books nor question my taste in film. Guess what?
What's
That's
that?
how that's how someone is supposed to feel about doing things that are productive, right?
Right, right,
And so when you shift into more of a human experience mindset, you're encouraging the people around you in your circle, regardless of what their ethnicity, color, culture is. Look, if you're in my circle, you're in my circle because I fool with you.
right,
Because
right.
we share values, we share perspectives. You know, you're making me a better person. I'm in turn trying to make you a better person, right? And that's self hatred.
Mm.
Those things that we experienced, in these different capacities, that's self hatred.
Self-hatred of the reality of being biracial.
It, the when you asked me if I had ever been called, what would you say? Not a sellout, but
Wannabe.
a wannabe. I mean, all of that is coming from a place of labeling and then assigning, your beliefs onto someone else.
Right, right. And then to navigate that, yeah, I do think there's some self-examination and conclusion for biracial kids navigating black space that probably have them compromise a bit too much when the reality is there's a single person who is both black and white, right? um, and I think generations over the generations that will change, which makes the comments you see in the section very, very relevant, timely, and important, to where they weren't even people didn't even frame their lips to push those kind of sentiments out their mouth because it didn't make any sense, historically. And that's why I admire sort of today's generation for making the question. But I will
Yes.
say this, and then we'll close her out if there aren't any questions. In order to transcend something, you have to know it. You have to understand it. You have to have dipped yourself in it. You have to have been it, and then to realize, okay, I've learned my lessons there appropriately, and now I can transcend it. To go back to King, he called that the beloved community, which was the capacity to transcend one's race, nation, color, creed towards a common humanhood, right? He's getting into agape conversations right now. But King never said forego. He never said leapfrog over. He never said don't embrace, right? So the reason you can transcend and I can transcend at times in my thinking is because I experienced it. And so today's monoracial mulatto community, I would still encourage an embrace and engagement of the whiteness that is you. We talked about this in previous shows, and then attach that to a country of origin for exploration, but also to embrace a blackness so that you can have a rooted sense of understanding of both in your case. And then when you get to the level of grander questions, a little bit of gray in your beard, a little bit of gray in your hair, and you're different dealing with family and relationship, and a little bit older, you too will begin to ponder, and a part of your new space might transcend what you're discovered with and are interacting with right now. My thoughts, beautiful J4 family and community. Let's see what's in these boxes. This would be the time to ask any questions that you might have. I think Alana is educating us. YouTube, I don't know what that is. Maybe you can give a little short description there, Alona San. Appreciate you. I'm not seeing any direct questions. In that, Gene, I'm going to turn it over to you. Brother, I appreciate you coming back with me for a part 2 of Biracial Black. Is there any last thoughts, questions, or items you want to share?
No, man. One of the things that I've learned over a half century is that the things that we can control and the things that we have learned produce happiness and peace for us are the things that we should spend our time on.
Mm.
And the complexity of race in this country, the complexity and the dichotomy of black and white in this country are components that because of the history of this space, um, will remain complex. You know,
Oh, no doubt.
for generations and generations. And so, seeking clarity, coming to your own understanding, having a centering around who you are, you know, and then whatever the language is that you use to qualify and identify yourself. I shouldn't say qualify, but identify yourself. You know, being rooted in that,
Mm-hmm.
immersed in it, and when ultimately someone challenges you, and you're able to communicate and articulate, you know, why that's how you identify, and then keep it moving. You know, appeasement and trying to fit in and overcoming insecurities and things like that. These are human tendencies. But I'm here to tell you, when you get to a place where you push past that and you understand that we're all human, and you know, we can embrace our culture, and we can love the things that we love about culture and all those types of things. Um, but I'm just not going to be hung up over my skin tone and the fact. I mean, I used to count and get mad at every time somebody asked me where my accent was from,
Right, right,
and now it's become a joke, right? It's a joke with my wife. It's a joke with some of my inner circle who understands that's part of it. And they experience it with me, right?
right.
Like, damn, they just that's another one. I'm
Mm-hmm. Gene, beautifully said, brother. You're welcome to stay on. We're now in the after show where I kind of go through the chats, and usually there's someone lingering. But for those of you all who are in the cloud watching, welcome. Thank you guys so much. Truly appreciate you being here. For those in the chats, y'all make sure you hit that like. You know, we're a channel that's focusing on parenting, and in this evidence case, offering intergenerational perspective in the biracial space. We don't claim or profess expertise. We simply proclaim and profess life lived.
That's right,
We
Jonesy. I'm gonna tap out, man.
all right, brother.
Yep, I'm running to the airport, bro.
All right, man. Enjoy
Hey,
enjoy the wife.
I'll say this: all love for everyone who spent some time here. Um, AJ said it best. We don't proclaim to be experts, you know, in identity, racial identity, in the genome, the human genome, or any of that, right? But do have experiences and have achieved some things that people would call success in some different, you know, components of our lives, and are in a good place in life, and we care for others. We want to be helpful to others. That drives and motivates us, and it's all love.
Beautiful, Gene. Enjoy the wife. Love you, dope.
All right, brother. Love you too, brother.
All right, now. Y'all, that's my friend, Mr. Gene Boyd, man. Appreciate y'all, listening in. As grown folks have grown responsibilities, we don't get a chance to vibe in this platform as much as we once did, and I miss that. But I enjoy, you all and your commentary and conversations. So we're in the after show right now. We are in the after show. If there's someone that has a question or wants to chop it up, we can do that. But this is my way of winding down. Just want to make sure I get the chats. Al show, I want to say a special thank you for kind of contributing to the dialogue, offering your generational perspective as well. Obviously, Magic Mulatto, Vanguard, you all have always been right there. Thank you guys so much. I agree, being biracial today in 23 is completely different thing than it was prior in the 90s and before, right? It is a different thing. It is absolutely a different thing, but it is an extension of your current reality. And I am very I have a strong belief in ancestral veneration, and a high regard for the work of elders. So your contemporary reality is what it is because of the work of previous generations living and transitioned. And so there's an interconnectedness you have to to the monoracial black here in the US. How you deal with that, how you represent that, I don't know. But there's a connection. This has been a great conversation. Thank you. I like to learn from other people's experience and the challenges you had before me. So thank you for sharing your story. Appreciate that. Al says, okay, thanks. All right. Beautiful family. Thank you guys so much for joining in. Again, like the page, subscribe if you have would like this to be a part of your YouTube energy and spirit. Certainly have aspirations to grow, but more importantly, I want to reach some mothers. I want to reach some mothers raising biracial kids in two parent homes or single parent homes just to be a sounding board. That is my biggest, I guess, priority in this page. There's too many babies born to first single parent homes. Too many babies born to single parent homes. African American community is at the highest representation of that. Biracial, two or more races, is not quite as high, but it is too high. And so I want to be a complement, be another voice that this is a sounding board or offers perspective on how to, raise as much as possible, beautiful, healthy, grounded sons and or daughters. And so if you see value in that or know someone that fits that particular reality, let them know, tell them to check out the page. And if they see value, come up in these boxes or to reach out to me. Let me put up my email. That's my email. And if there's anyone wants to talk about possible collaborations or conversations, that would be the email to send it to. I think we had a comment. Campaign to 1K subs. Let's do it. Thank you, Mulatto. I appreciate that. Beautiful. All right, y'all. Thank you guys so much. On behalf of J4 Conversations, love, love, love.